Hi, I'm Talia Baroncelli, and you're watching theAnalysis-news. I'll shortly be joined by Imad Salamey to speak about Hezbollah, as well as the recent strike in the south of Beirut, which killed Hamas deputy leader Saleh al-Arouri. We just started a new year, so if you'd like to support us at the beginning of this year, you can do so by going to our website, theAnalysis.news, and hitting the donate button at the top right corner of the screen. You can also get onto our mailing list and like and subscribe to the show wherever you watch us, be it on YouTube or other podcast streaming services such as Apple or Spotify. See you in a bit with Professor Salamey. Joining me now to break down the developments ongoing in Lebanon is Professor Imad Salamey. He's an associate professor of political science and international affairs at the Lebanese American University, which is in Beirut. He's also the author of numerous books, including 2 books published in 2021 called The Government and Politics of Lebanon and the Communitarian Nation-State Paradox in Lebanon. So thank you so much for joining me today, Professor Salamey.
Thank you, Talia.
Well, we've seen numerous strikes in the Middle East, or what some people are now calling West Asia, including 2 suicide bombings in Kerman in the southeastern part of Iran, which attacked people that were commemorating the killing of Qasem Soleimani. So 84 people, at least 84 people were killed there, and over 284, I believe, were wounded. And in addition to that, on January 2nd, we saw the deputy head of Hamas in the south part of Beirut being taken out by a strike. And that's, of course, al-Arouri. And so far, Israel hasn't actually claimed responsibility for that attack, though they haven't really actively denied any responsibility there either. So that's maybe something that we could discuss throughout our discussion today. But in response to this strike and taking out al-Arouri, the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, has said that there would be a full-scale war if Israel decided to invade and to escalate. But at the moment, it seems like there's more of a strategic balancing, and there hasn't been any sort of warfare that goes beyond low-intensity attacks. And it's very difficult to say whether this will indeed escalate. How do you perceive what's going on? Do you think that Hezbollah will decide to take this and make this into a much broader regional war?
Yes, Talia, thanks for the question. It is very important to think about these issues right now as we, go into a very unstable and fluid situation here in Lebanon and a wider Middle Eastern region. Of course, the assassination of Arouri in Beirut, in the southern district of the city, was a major a change in the rule of engagement, so to speak, that was governed the confrontation on the Lebanese-Israeli borders for the past 2 months almost. Since October 7, there were limited skirmishes, what we call a low-intensity conflict taking place on that border. It's a conflict or fighting that have been raging on within like 7 kilometers of both sides of the borders. But the assassination of Saleh Arouri, deputy political bureau of Hamas, was a major escalation, so to speak, by Israel, where it went all the way to the capital city of Beirut to kill the leader of Hamas. And that definitely this is from a perspective from the various threats made by Hezbollah and its leaders, Hassan Nasrallah, that requires some kind of major retaliations on the party's side. However, if you listen to Nasrallah's previous speech, and today he just gave a speech as well, it appears that Nasrallah has been trying to the extent possible to divert a major retaliation that could lead to also a major retaliation by Israel, or what we are calling here an open warfare between both sides, or open conflict that could lead to the utilizations of like more of strategic weapons, such as long-range missiles from Hezbollah sides, or by Israel bombarding major infrastructures for the party all over the country. So definitely, I believe that Hezbollah and Nasrallah are hesitant of making the wrong move here in this battle. They are carefully calculating every actions they're making in this warfare, and trying to divert a major kind of war. And therefore, what we are hearing right now is a message where the retaliation of Hezbollah will be made based on their own timing and based on the positions or the place they feel is best to retaliate, maybe now, maybe in the future. So this gives us a kind of, a pretext for Hezbollah not to immediate retaliation, and not to be, to start a major conflict here in the country. And, when you hear also Hezbollah and particularly Nasrallah speaking about how they want or how they see the course of this warfare, their intention, as they say, is to back Gaza, Hamas in Gaza, rather than to become the fighting force against Israel, or to have the front shifted from that of Gaza into Lebanon, and then the whole political issue becomes that of Lebanon, Israel, or that of Iran, Israel, because Iran supports Hezbollah on all levels, economically, militarily, and politically. So I guess for the moment, Hezbollah is trying to prevent this kind of scenario from taking place. They are continuously trying to maintain a low conflict as to play the supporting act or the supportive role to those, to Hamas fighting Gaza, rather than to become the military front in the fight against Israel here in Lebanon. So in a way, like what I'm trying to say is that, perhaps Nasrallah and Hezbollah do not want now to retaliate in any major way that would spark a major war here in the south.
Right. They're trying to avoid stealing the spotlight away from Gaza for various reasons. But Lebanon is no stranger to being attacked by Israel. I mean, there was the invasion in 1982, and even up to 2006, there was ongoing warfare between Israel and various groups in Lebanon. And of course, many civilians were killed in Lebanon. A lot of civilian infrastructure was killed. And I believe there was a doctrine that Israel developed in that fighting called the Dahiya Doctrine, in which Israel would attack certain civilian areas where militants were residing in, and the whole purpose was to try and damage the civilian infrastructure so that those civilians would actually pressure the militants to leave those areas. I mean, whether this is an effective strategy or not, I mean, I highly doubt it. But would you say that Israel is still using or deploying that strategy? And would you also say that Hezbollah's response has been informed by, decades of fighting between Israel and various groups in Lebanon?
Yeah, I mean, definitely what we've seen from Israeli actions in the past is what we call the collective punishment, where, like what's happening today in Gaza. I mean, much of the military tactics utilized by the Israeli army is to attack major civilian infrastructure, to destroy every possible means of survival for the civilian population in the different areas of Gaza. and therefore to create local pressure by the civilian population against the militants. And in this way, the civilian population become in a position contradictory to those of the militant, and this how Israel and kind of calculate or consider this as a way to undermine public support for Palestinian armed groups. And I think Israel has utilized this same tactics in southern Lebanon or in many confrontations. However, they at one time in '96, at least, there were a kind of an agreements brokered by France at that time where there was an agreement where neither side would utilize civilian areas for the fight, and any retaliations would be exclusive to military positions. Of course, was broken in 2006 again in Lebanon, where we had a major incursions by Israel, major fight that led to the destructions of power stations, the destructions of major bridges and roads. So the target was of civilian, and that, of course, Israel was aimed from those attacks to create an anti-Hezbollah popular discontent with, or against the party, and therefore, I guess right now this can develop into those directions. However, till now, it has remained very limited. The fight on the southern border between both sides to military installations. There hasn't been attack against civilian settlements or housing inside Israel by Hezbollah, nor has been any real attack against civilian targets in Lebanon. And that's why, what we're calling this kind of confrontations that both sides are fighting within an understandable rule of engagement, a rule of engagement where the civilian sides are spared from this conflict. So thus far, this is how it has been going. But situation can easily go out of hand, and the situation can become more volatile. But for any reasons, a mistake happened and large number of civilians were hurt by any attacks, and that bring about a strong retaliation by either side, and then we cannot control it anymore. But thus far, it has been of low intensity skirmishes, attacks here and there without major bombardment as civilian targets.
Well, the situation is quite tense. As you say, we don't know if there will be any additional escalations, and the United States has been sending additional military assets to the Eastern Mediterranean, as well as reinforcing some of the troops that are stationed there. So how are these developments perceived by Hezbollah? I mean, do they take this as a direct incursion into their sort of space or as a threat, or are they really just worried about Israel?
No, of course. I mean, Hezbollah considers the United States as part of the overall war in the region, being a main ally to Israel in terms of providing Israel with all kinds of supports, political, economic, military, and United States official position is to place the Hezbollah among the terrorist list, so is Hamas. So in that sense, the party does not distinguish much between the United States and Israel. And actually, the latest assassination, targeted killing of al-Arouri, the leader of Hamas in the southern district of Lebanon, you're going to find out that al-Arouri was listed on the U.S. list of terrorists, and there was a 5 million prize put for any information leading to his arrest or killing. So therefore, it is not much. There isn't much distinctions, at least from a Hezbollah perspective, between the United States and Israel. They're both allies, and they're both responsible for the atrocities taking place in Gaza today, and they're both orchestrating this fight against what Hezbollah considered the axis of resistance. And therefore, you're finding, in many ways, attack against U.S. targets nowadays, especially in Iraq, with the U.S. bases and surrounded by many pro-Iranian and pro-Hezbollah groups who have been launching missiles against these bases because they consider the United States is the sole responsible over what Israel is doing. This feelings on Hezbollah and so-called the axis of resistance groups is consolidated by the fact that the United States has repeatedly vetoed any resolutions in the United Nations Security Councils demanding a ceasefire in Gaza or to open getaways for humanitarian assistance in any serious ways, or to open what is called to undermine the siege of Gaza. And that, consolidate, so to speak, the convictions that the United States is part of this conflict when it's backing Israel in what it's doing. So when U.S. warship passes through the Strait of Yemen, Bab el-Mandeb, or they come to the Mediterranean, Hezbollah considered this is a direct threat or a message to the party that it will be targeted in any kind of an open conflict with Israel. And Nasrallah has vowed to target these ships in case they, join the fight, and expressed, fearfulness from these ships or from American military presence in the region. So this is how it is being, unfolding here in the region.
Well, you mentioned the so-called axis of resistance, which is comprised of groups such as Ansar Allah or the Houthis, as well as Hamas and Hezbollah. And as you mentioned, there have been numerous attacks on commercial vessels by the Houthis in the Red Sea. And in response to these attacks, in order to ensure that there's global trade and commerce, the United States has created a sort of neighborhood watch, which actually doesn't really involve many countries in the Persian Gulf or the neighborhood. The only country that's involved from that area is Bahrain, and the United States and the United Kingdom are the other countries that are really leading this initiative. Countries such as Italy in Europe have pulled out. So you do wonder how well thought out this particular initiative was. But in addition to that neighborhood watch, Politico reported that the Biden administration has other plans to potentially escalate the conflict in response to what's going on. So they've been launching additional drone strikes in Iraq and in Syria. We just saw a member of the Popular Mobilization Front, which is an Iranian-backed group in Iraq, being taken out by a U.S. drone strike. So I do wonder, these additional plans that the U.S. has, do you see this potentially leading to a full-out war with Iran?
Yeah, I think the United States is quite concerned about the widening of this conflict, where it become a direct confrontation between the United States and Iran, because then a full-scale war, regional war with Iran means, full mobilizations of U.S. troops, Marines, Air Force. That means that Iran may be able to close the Hormuz Strait. It may launch missiles against the U.S. bases in the Gulf countries, Arab Gulf states. That means that Iran can actually, kind of devastate the U.S. presence in the region. And we were talking about here a full-scale war. That means we're talking about thousands and thousands of casualties. That means, United States will have to engage in a war on a wide scale with various fronts. I mean, a fight with Iran doesn't mean a fight just across the Iranian borders, because Iran has many proxy groups, many militant supported groups all over the world, but particularly in Lebanon with Hezbollah, in Iraq with Hashd al-Shabi, with Yemen with the Houthis. So we can expect that any fight between Iran and the United States will become a regional war, and the United States will have to have many fights on different grounds. And I guess this is one of the reasons why many European countries pulled out from these coalitions that meant to secure passages through Bab al-Mandeb in Yemen, because many Europeans fear that if a confrontation started with the Houthis in Yemen, this will prepare the ground for a wider confrontation, whereby the Europeans will have to be pulled into this conflict against Iran. And I don't think the Europeans at this moment are ready for such a scenario. The Europeans are already overwhelmed with the instability that took place in Syria, that led to massive migrations of refugees to European states, and undermined these migration waves, undermined the unity of the European Union. So imagine what happened if Iran became unstable, and there were a lot of or massive migrations at the same time due to conflict or war from Iran to different European countries. So Europe is much closer. You see, it's much closer to the conflicts, and much closer geographically to Iran and to Iranian allies. So it's much more concerned and much more cautious than how the United States would act vis-a-vis Iran. Now, it is kind of what we're seeing is that Israel in particular is trying to encourage some kind of regional confrontation, because Israel recognizes full well that the different groups it's confronting on its own are backed and supported by Iran, whether they're Hezbollah or Hamas or Hashd al-Shabi or the Houthis. These different groups, Iran knows full well that it can fight with them, but it will never be victorious as long as Iran continues to support these groups, okay, as the lifeline to these groups is held in Tehran. And therefore, Israel is recognizing day after another that the only way to stop security threat against its national security and national interest is to really undermine the Iranian military bases, military power, and cut off this kind of line of support to these proxies from Iran to them. And the only way to do this is perhaps maybe to have a major confrontations where the United States become involved in attacking and bombarding Iran. And so, definitely, however, one can see that any confrontation with Iran is not going to be a simple fight. It will be a major undertaking. We don't know how other countries will react. I mean, we have to also factor in here Russia. We have to factor in here China. How will they behave if Iran was attacked by the United States and, in one way or another, Iran was to lose this fight, because these countries consider also they have many military cooperation agreements with Iran, especially Russia, and whether they would come to Iranian aids and to prolong any regional confrontation with the United States, so the United States will end up in the same boat as Russia and Ukraine. It will become, United States with Iran. And I mean, there are many factors to consider here in any regional confrontation that are very complex and can lead to serious repercussions if not well thought of. And I guess everybody, particularly the Europeans, are concerned about this, but also the American military is concerned about venturing into uncalculated encounter with Iran.
Well, the Europeans are concerned, but I think these issues always have a different spin when you look at the domestic politics of each individual member state. And I think, you were talking about the issue of additional migration waves coming from Syria and how in 2015 Europe was overwhelmed, but perhaps that was a bit of a fabrication as well, because there wasn't very much solidarity between the European states to take in Syrians, but also, there wasn't enough sharing of the burden, so to speak, between member states, but also no real solidarity with the people who are in need, who are being displaced from countries like Syria, whereas we see the opposite happening with Ukraine, where Ukrainians were taken in with open arms, as they should be. I mean, that should be the case regardless of the background of the asylum seekers in question, regardless of whether they have blue eyes, blonde hair, or darker complexion. So I think there's always a domestic component to it. And so going beyond what the domestic issues might be for Europe and whether they want to support Gaza or support Israel or oppose Hezbollah, for example, if we look at what the domestic politics are in Lebanon, how is the population there responding to what's going on in Gaza, but also to this potential escalation between Israel and Hezbollah? I mean, it's a sectarian country, of course, and there are a lot of different groups. So how would you say the response has been domestically from within Lebanon to these developments?
Yes, Talia, we are very concerned. I mean, Lebanese in general are very concerned about this state of instability and, the constant anticipations of what could happen anytime, any hour, whether we will be dragged into a major war with Israel, or with this end soon with some kind of political solutions to the conflict or some kind of ceasefire. So the Lebanese are worried, there is a continuous concern about how the situation developing. So that's why you see people always watching news, or they are on their Twitters, they're trying to figure out what's happening second by second, very alerted population. And, and this is really concerning. And what we've seen in the last 2 months, much of foreign population in the country, like Europeans, Americans, who were either working for international organizations in the country, or they were at university as students, they left. So we have this feeling of an anxiety here that, business is not as usual. No, not even Lebanese coming to Lebanon or the diaspora living abroad. It's a lot of concerns. And this is taking its toll on the economy for sure. Now, in terms of, how the Lebanese are thinking about the Gaza situation, of course, Lebanese, like many people around the country, are, they condemn in many ways what's happening in terms of the civilian population being, paying the toll for this military encounters between Hamas and Israel, people stand in solidarity. They feel with the children, with the innocent lives that being spared in this fight. Many consider Israel retaliation and actions, as overwhelming. So they condemned Israel action, and this is across all sectarian and confessional groups in the country. Nonetheless, there is a clear division, political division, of what to do, what for Lebanon to do, given what's happening in Gaza. Of course, Hezbollah on its own has decided to engage the Israeli forces as a form of solidarity with Hamas and with the Palestinians in Gaza, and consider this is a duty of the Lebanese to support their brothers and sisters in Palestine and undermine this military campaign by drifting Israeli forces or splitting the Israeli forces between the south and the north of Israel. Hezbollah considers also, and supporters of Hezbollah consider that the defeat of Hamas and the occupation of Israel to Gaza paves the way for another incursion against Lebanon, because, the same pretext used to destroy Hamas and Gaza can be used against Hezbollah in Lebanon next time around. So the concern, this concerns, is utilized as a pretext for Hezbollah's armed engagement with the Israelis and to display some kind of solidarity with the Palestinian people. Now, not all Lebanese take on these positions. Other Lebanese, especially on the Christian side of Lebanon, considers Hezbollah actions is not necessarily that of Lebanon or the country's interest, is not being taken with the consent of the Lebanese population, is not coming out from a government perspectives, is in violation of UN resolutions, particularly Resolution 1701, which called for a disarmed regions in southern Lebanon, where actually Hezbollah is operating right now. And consider that Lebanon should take on a neutral stand because it cannot afford a military confrontation with Israel. So we have that kind of political division of what to do given the situation in Gaza. Those who support Hezbollah's actions by going into confrontation with Israel, those who consider Lebanon is too weak in such a confrontation, it will pay a heavy price if Israel decided to militarily retaliate against Lebanon. So best to take on a neutral position and abide by UN resolutions and all that. So there is a quite deep rift in a political scenery in Lebanon. Yet this has not been manifested in any kind of actions on the ground. People are still waiting in anticipation of what can happen in Gaza, and everybody is kind of still awaiting some kind of solutions or resolution or international interventions that will stop the war and bring about a ceasefire, so Lebanon will be spared from this fight, and things will not deteriorate or escalate further.
Well, Professor Salamey, it was a pleasure speaking to you, and let's hope next time we speak there will be a ceasefire as well as a cessation in hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah and other actors in the region. So let's hope next time things will be a bit more positive.
Thank you, Tadia.
You've just been watching part 1 of my discussion with Professor Imad Salamey. Part 2 will be about sectarianism in Lebanon and the consociational state. If you'd like to support the work that we do, you can do so by going to our website, theAnalysis.news, and hitting the donate button at the top right corner of the screen. Get onto our mailing list as well. Thanks for watching and see you next time.